Thank you. Good afternoon. Bonjour à tous. You make these little remarks on that you send to the speakers to kind of introduce yourselves, and then I thought about it when I was sitting there this morning. Actually, what I probably should have said was, I'm the person that signs the migratory game hunting permit, and that's probably what makes most sense for you. So that's what I do, and a whole bunch of other things as well. I'm going to speak first and talk about the modernization of the hunting provisions of Canada's Migratory Bird Regulations, and then Jack is going to follow and talk more specifically about the situation in Ontario. And I think what we'll do is I'll speak, and then Jack will speak, and then we'll take questions, both of us, together, so we can toss the questions back and try to answer them. Greg had asked me to come and talk about the modernization of the hunting regs, but I also wanted to take the opportunity to just put a few other messages in as well. So I'm going to speak, I better move the slides, just briefly about the Hunting and Angling Advisory Panel that Greg mentioned and what we're doing in that panel. Talk a little bit about the National Conservation Plan, and then we'll get into the meat of the issue, and we'll talk about the issues that we're going to address with the modernization of those regs, the consultation process, and then really underline that we want to hear from you on that in the weeks to come. Maybe just before I start, I guess one other message and related to the hunting, the availability of the hunting permits. I just want to let you know that in some places there are some problems getting them from the Canada Post outlets, and just want you to know that we're very much aware, and we're working hard with Canada Post to make sure that all the vendors that they put them out, and I know they're working hard to have them available. But we're also looking toward the future as well, and we're working very actively on an e-permit project. And so in a couple years' time, assuming all goes well, so not this coming hunting season, but the one after that, we actually hope to have the permits available through electronic means as well as in paper format. Also, starting this summer, if anyone wants to get their hunting permit ahead of time before they're available in the Canada Post outlets, you can actually send us a faxed or scanned form, and we'll mail them out to folks, and we'll get information out to people on how to do that. So just wanted to let you know that we're trying to be very responsive to some of the concerns that we have and make it as easy as possible for people to get the permits. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the Hunting and Angling Advisory Panel. This is a panel, an advisory panel to the Minister of the Environment, as well as the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans also participates in it. The Prime Minister actually announced the creation of this advisory panel in April 2011. He did that as part of the meeting of the National Fish and Wildlife Conservation Congress, the first of its kind that took place in Ottawa at that time. The panel consists of 25 member organizations from across the country, 9 national organizations, and 16 provincial regional type organizations. It reports to the Minister of the Environment, and it serves as an advisory body to the Minister of Environment, but also the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans on issues related to conservation, hunting, trapping, and angling. It's really meant to ensure that future conservation practices, including the protection of endangered species, are very much based on Canadians who have a long tradition of conservation. And obviously that's the people that are sitting in this room and many of your colleagues. The meeting the panel is in its infancy. It's now had 3 meetings. The first meeting was perhaps a kind of get to know you and kind of figure out how this panel is going to work, but the last 2 meetings have been, I think, very, very productive. We had one at the end of January. Some of the areas that we've focused on are the modernization of the hunting regs that I'm going to talk about. Had 2 sessions on that and talked back and forth and got input from the panel on that. One of the things that was talked about in the January meeting was really following up on some of the recommendations that came from the National Fish and Wildlife Conservation Congress and what could the HAP do about them. And there was a lot of consensus that from across the country about the importance of educating Canadians and communicating to Canadians about the importance of conservation and the importance of being able to hunt and fish, and the need to make sure people were aware of those issues and the importance of that in society. So that's one project that the panel is going to take on for the future. They've also talked about the National Conservation Plan. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The Fisheries Protection Program, the changes to the Fisheries Act, as well as the Recreational Fisheries Conservation Partnership Program, which was actually extended in the most recent budget. The Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters is a member of that. Greg is on the committee. He actually plays a very, very constructive role in working between my office and many of the members. And we very, very much appreciate that. Anyhow, that's a picture of the Hunting and Angling Advisory Panel at the January meeting, and I think you can see Greg right in the row, the front row, and our Minister Glukak, with the rest of the panel. So that gives you a sense of what that panel is all about. The second thing I wanted to cover was the National Conservation Plan, and you've probably heard something about the National Conservation Plan. It's actually been talked about in Speech from the Throne and the budget for the last couple of years, and people I know are anxiously waiting for that. Well, I'd like to let people know that I expect it will be announced relatively soon, certainly in this calendar year. Already some things that might be considered as part of that were announced in the most recent budget. There were some investments in national parks, extending the Recreational Fisheries Conservation Partnership Program, and there were also some changes announced related to the Ecological Gifts Program. The National Conservation Plan is coming and urge people to watch for that. Again, just like to underline that the Ontario Federation of Angling and Hunting has been very active in providing input to the NCP through the HAP panel, 2 parliamentary studies, and a ministerial roundtable on that topic. Stakeholders have described the NCP as an opportunity to establish an overarching vision of conservation in Canada, as well as a focus on really 3 priority areas: conserving, restoring biodiversity, and connecting Canadians with nature. And I know I've heard all about some of those issues already this morning. So that's the NCP, and just encourage people to watch for that. Okay, now moving on to the advertised program here. The modernization of the hunting regs. The Canadian Wildlife Service of Environment Canada is planning to amend these regulations to deal with an accumulation of issues that have been raised over the past several years. Any of you that have looked at them will find that the text is kind of complex, it's unclear, and it can be confusing to interpret. So we're hoping to fix those issues. Changes are needed to reflect the modern hunting landscape, which is quite different from the time that they were originally written, and then they have had some changes since then, but haven't had changes for a while. So clearly there are fewer hunters than there were formerly. waterfowl populations actually are generally in good shape, so maybe the regulations don't need to be quite as stringent in some areas. There are some species that we're dealing with that are overabundant. And I think we've got pretty well-established processes to ensure that harvests are sustainable with the surveys and follow-up work. So it's a bit of a different time, so we can look at these regs in that context. So, okay, so the objectives of the proposed amendments. The proposed amendments are to improve the management of hunting by ensuring we have the right tools for conservation and sustainable hunting, to be clear on the intended effect of each provision, to avoid any unnecessary barriers or irritants to hunters. And you can tell us whether the changes we're making are introducing any new irritants or are sufficiently removing them. We want to encourage participation in hunting, and we want to, of course, maintain general support for hunting as well. So that's really the objectives of what we're trying to do with the regs, or the changes to the regs. And I should just clarify that there are kind of annual and soon to be every 2-year changes to the regs that reflect the surveys, and that's not what this is all about. This is actually changing the overall nature of the regans and the structure. So this isn't about changes to the bag limits or the season dates that happen annually or soon to be every 2 years. It's about issues like possession, labeling, transportation, wastage, those kinds of things. We've listened to the issues we've heard submitted by hunters and outfitters. We've listened to and heard things like people want to donate birds for serving at event dinners, like perhaps something like tonight. Possession limits should not apply to sausages, taxidermy, birds taken from previous seasons. People want clarity about what's really required for labeling, and maybe it could be made a little bit simpler. Need ability to deal with incidents of wastage. These are some of the issues that we've attempted to deal with them. There are other issues as well, but that just gives you a highlight. In addition to hearing from hunters, we've heard from others that are involved in this activity. We've listened to some of the enforcement officers. We've listened to some of the government biologists, the people that produce ammunition, and some of the administrators, and some of the other kinds of things that we're going to try to deal with these changes to the regs are in the ammunition producers, the whole issue of what is non-toxic shock and how to actually label the ammunition accordingly. We're going to make changes that makes that much simpler to get that certification. On the enforcement side of things, courts have been interpreting some of the issues differently, particularly relates to who needs a hunting permit. So we're going to clarify that so that there's a much more consistent approach. So the work today, and what I'll talk about, and I'm going to tell you about a consultation document. What we've done is we've looked at each issue, and do we need to change the approach fundamentally, or is it really just fixing of a few words that actually will make the correction that we need? We're going to be introducing a consultation document. It's going to focus more on the changing of the approach as for the first step, but certainly if there are some wording changes, we'd like to hear about that as well. So I had hoped actually to be able to distribute a consultation document today. We have some technical glitches in it. It's just not quite available today, but it will be in the next few weeks. But this is essentially the table of contents from the document and what it's going to cover. So it's going to look at what is hunting, what activities are considered hunting, and thus who needs a permit. and it'll be trying to clarify exactly who it is that needs a permit. Is it everyone that's out there hunting, or actually what's being proposed is the person that actually is doing the hunting, has the means and is attempting to doing the hunting. It's going to recommend a family permit. So there could be one permit where the bag limit is actually shared amongst the family members. So what is hunting is one of the categories. The second thing that it's going to look at, a second kind of big group of things, deals with possession and abandonment. It's actually when does possession end? That will be one of the things that's looked at, and essentially what's going to be proposed is once it's processed, it's no longer in your possession limit. There will be a prohibition of abandonment. There will be simpler requirements for labeling during processing and getting to processing. And then there will also be some specific amendments to deal with companies that teach retriever training, and so that they can have a certain number of birds available and do that all legally. It talks a bit, there's a section on hunting methods and equipment, and this is where we deal with the new streamlined approach to authorizing non-toxic shot. Also, we're going to propose another option for species identification. So in addition to just the wing, we're also going to offer the head as an option. Again, some specific changes to deal with crossbows and some other technical specifications. And then lastly, one of the big items that we're looking at here is allowing the donation of migratory birds to event dinners, food banks, that kind of thing. And I know that these are the things that people have been asking for. So we've been working on this for a couple of years. We've had face-to-face discussions with provinces and territories, with some of the regional technical committees, and of course this association is represented on the Ontario Regional Technical Committee, the Hunting and Angling Advisory Panel, and we've also discussed our proposed changes with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Flyway Councils. We have a discussion paper, and I hope that you'll get that in the next couple of weeks. And there will be actually a consultation process that lasts about 60 days. We will publish the document on the web, and in my next slide I'll show you where you can find that. But we will also distribute the document to a broad stakeholder list, and clearly the Ontario Federation will be one of those stakeholders, and I'm sure they'll get it out to folks that might not otherwise see it. So that document is coming, so watch for it, and we certainly want to hear from you about whether you think we've got the approach right. It essentially lays out all the things we've heard, lays out a number of different options, and then makes a recommendation. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear whether we got it right, whether we've missed some key issues, so we're very much looking to hear from you. That's the website. And I'll just leave that up for a few minutes so that you can copy it down. But you'll probably get this information through a distribution as well. But I would say in the next couple of weeks, this document should be out, and we'll be launching the consultation process. After we hear from you, we'll probably be going back to some of the associations, and I expect by about this time next year, we'll actually be formally moving into the regulatory process, where again, there are opportunities for a public comment, although we kind of want to hear it at a higher level kind of initially before we get into the hard legal drafting stage. So with that, that's all I really wanted to raise with you.